5 book. You've probably heard the expression, off the rails. It usually signifies that somebody has let the side down by descending to a little blackmailing, or perhaps a touch of arson. In fact, going off the rails is usually taken as a sign of being not quite straight. I'm using the term, however, in quite a different sense. Today I'm going to tell you something about criminals who, when they're off the rails, are on the rails. Perhaps that sounds a little ambiguous. Let me put it in a simpler way. This program is about the kind of crime and the kind of criminal who is most at home on the railway. Let's start off this Secrets of Scotland Yard program with a few facts about robbery on the railway.
In 1938, claims against the railways for stolen goods costing about £180,000. Today, similar claims are costing over £2.5 million a year. As an inspector of the railway police, that's not a fact I'm particularly proud about. All the same, it goes to prove that robbery on the railways is a growing business. Our job is to stop it growing.
Almost half the claims were for the theft of tobacco, wine, spirits, textiles, boots and shoes, articles which have the greatest black market value.
Investigating them is taking up much of the working time of more than 1,000 railway officials.
Hello? What are you doing with that crate? Hey, just moving it. Moving it where? Who's that to do with you? I'm a railway porter. Oh, is that so? What's the look of that badge of yours? Here, let go my crate there. I think you'd better come along. Oh, no, you don't.
Pilferage has ceased to be a proper description of railway thieving. Wholesale looting is the only term appropriate. The railway police estimate that about 60% of the looting is carried out by organized gangs, usually not more than 6 in number. Scotland Yard has met cunning with cunning, but those who specialize in robbery on the railway are always up to new tricks. Now listen to this story. It occurred not so long ago. A goods train was puffing slowly up an incline on its run from Nottingham to Chesterfield. Standing by a plate-laying hut at the crest of the hill, you might have seen a small gang of workmen. Apparently, they were waiting for the train to pass before resuming work on the line.
All right, chaps. It's the 5th van after the engine. Remember? The 5th van. Charlie, Jim, wait till I give the word jump. Just the way we rehearsed it. Okay, Jack. All right, jump. Okay, boys. Pass me a crowbar. There you are. Now, give us a hand. There we go. Ah, that's got it. Now go on, in we go. Good luck, sir. Where's your trouble?
Once inside the van, which contained hundreds of pounds worth of cigarettes, the gang got to work. As soon as the train left the tunnel, they pushed open the door and threw down the embankment over 1 million cigarettes, packed neatly in cartons. And here comes the organization. Waiting on the road by the side of the embankment were a couple of lorries.
All right, boys. Get busy. Go on there. Load them up. Right away there. As soon as you're ready, let's get going.
They didn't find the cigarettes were missing until the train was 100 miles further up the line. Obviously, the men who boarded the train must have had a good idea of what was in the van. They knew exactly where the train would slow down, and they calculated the whole job in such a way, proving they were professionals at the game. These men got away with it. But it doesn't always go that way. Listen to this case. It took place a few months ago, late one night at one of London's largest goods yards. The Cricklewood sighting.
Hey, anybody about? Who's that? Evening, watchman. Evening, mate. Sorry to be so late, chum. I'm afraid you'll have to open up these gates. What's the idea? It's 12:30. I know that, mate. But there's a load of one of these vans in the siding which is wanted extra special. And if we don't get it down to the docks by 6 o'clock tomorrow morning, somebody's going to lose a few £1,000s.
We'll have to see your papers.
Don't you worry. Everything's in order. Here, take a look at this.
It seems all right. You've got permission?
Well, that's what it says.
All right, I'll open up.
Well, don't be long about it.
Come on, then.
We'll be coming out in about an hour. All right.
I'm coming.
Come on now, open up these gates.
Now, hold on a moment. I've got some friends to see you.
What do you mean, friends?
Hello, John. Fancy meeting you.
Look out, boys! Ruffles!
Yes, it was the Ruzzers, the police to you and me. And as the inspector says, the boot was on the other foot. The watchman felt suspicious about the whole thing, and he'd contacted the railway police. He was right. They were stolen goods, and the papers were forged. 7 men were picked up in the fight which followed, but the leader got away.
Of course, not all railway robberies are as ambitious and were organized as the two you've just heard about. The simplest, and yet one of the most effective methods of looting, has been for railway employees to stick false labels on parcels and packages in transit. One porter readdressed parcels to his own home. A relabeling conspiracy at Waterloo Station was broken up through the vigilance of an employee.
I've got a couple of parcels for you.
Oh, shall I sign for them?
Yeah, that's right, miss. Sign here.
My daughter's wedding. She's having such a lot of presents.
Yes, so I noticed.
Bring them in here, will you? Thanks a lot. Good morning.
Daughter's wedding. That's funny. I can understand her getting a mangle. But what's she doing with 24 electric light lamps? Don't seem to be the sort of wedding present she'd get. I wonder if there's something fishy going on.
And from wondering, was only a step further to talking to the railway police about it. It was found that this was just one of the ways in which a very astute gang had been robbing the railways. It was not the only method they used. It was found that packages in transit had been redirected under other names to small stations where they were later collected by members of a gang, one in a chauffeur's uniform. The final destination of the stolen goods was a flat in Soho, where the thieves operated in a quick sales showroom and office. The flat was raided and the ringleaders caught. I'm going to have a look round.
Who sent you?
Charlie.
Ah, that's all right. Come on in. Well, what do you want to say? Cigarettes, radio sets, or was it butter?
I think I've seen quite enough. I have a search warrant here.
Here, what's a gun?
This is not a game. This is a raid.
Chests of tea and other goods worth hundreds of pounds were recovered. But the police knew that for a long period beforehand, the gang got away with much more than that. These modern highwaymen are certainly people of resource. But if you think you've heard the limit of their ingenuity, just wait and see. Before turning to the organization of the railway police, let's take a few more examples of crime on the railway.
In a railway yard in Scotland at one time, whole truckloads of coal were systematically rerouted to the yard of a small merchant who was in a swim.
4 porters at Woking took advantage of a consignment to set up a nylon emporium and sell the stockings through station taxi drivers.
Railway police bored 2 holes in a wooden fence by a railway arch in Suffolk and watched loot worth £2,500 being carried into a thieves' den. 9 men and a woman were convicted. One man had a puppy in a crate, which began barking, and the police overheard him say, "Shut up. You'll have to get used to being here."
Now listen to the story of just an ordinary member of the railway police. He was on duty at a goods yard at Burton-on-Trent one dark evening. His name was Railway Police Constable Robert Cameron.
Hi there. What do you want?
I'd like to take a look at that lorry, if you don't mind.
What right have you got?
I'm a member of the railway police.
Yes, I don't care if you're a member of the Marines. On the night.
You'll still have to stop, I'm afraid.
Oh, will I? Oh. Come on, boys. Tie him up and leave him in that shed over there.
He feigned unconsciousness while he was dragged into a warehouse and tied up. When the thieves had gone, leaving the whiskey behind, he struggled free and crawled to a shunter's cabin. Today, Railway Police Constable Robert Cameron wears the British Empire Medal. Perhaps the most amusing conclusion to any incident of pure pilferage was an occasion when a portrait crew danced into a mirror one Sunday and saw a man in a quiet corner of another platform undo his braces and turn slowly round and round. A chase down a lane followed until the man's trousers fell to the ground and he halted sheepishly in his underpants with ring upon ring of twist tobacco, stolen from a crate in the station, wound round his middle.
Police officers at Euston saw 2 men in porters' uniforms examining goods loaded on barrows ready for dispatch, and knew that neither was employed in handling parcels traffic. While they watched, one of the men removed labels from 3 bales, which the second man then transferred to a smaller barrow. This was wheeled out to a point near the station cloakroom. The man walked away, but returned a few minutes later with 2 other men who began loading the barrels into a waiting motor car. All were arrested. The barrels were worth £300.
Before the British Railways were nationalised, each company maintained its own police force, led in many cases by ex-members of Scotland Yard. Today, the Railway Police is a complete force of its own, charged with the particular responsibility of policing and protecting thousands of buildings and many thousands of miles owned by British Railways. The men who discharge this duty undergo a special training. They learn most of the tricks we've told you about today in this program, and they cooperate with the regular police force and Scotland Yard to put a stop to every form of crime on the railways. Perhaps the most unpopular of all railway criminals are those who play for the high stakes and endeavor to rob His Majesty's mails.
Of course, there were some classic mailbag robberies of the past, but today's stories read like fiction. A £10,000 mailbag theft last year from a Glasgow Euston train remains unsolved. The empty bags were found on an embankment 70 yards away. The disappearance of nearly £40,000 in £5 and £1 notes in transit between a city bank and Scotland is still being investigated. A litter bag containing 6,000 pounds vanished during a 60-minute road and rail journey between Liverpool and Wigan. And when a packet which contained 2,000 pounds for a Manchester bank was opened, the contents had miraculously changed to wooden blocks. To be strictly accurate, the theft of mail bags comes under the General Post Office and is not really the railway's responsibility. But it's their worry all the same. Here's the story of one of the most classic of mailbag robberies of all time.
The scene is one of the sorting vans on a world-famous night mail train. Leaving Euston Station in London every evening just before midnight, it reaches Scotland the following morning. While most of Britain is asleep, this train speeds through the heart of the country. The nerve centre of the train is the sorting van, where almost 100 men are at work all night sorting Scottish mail picked up at London and dividing it up into the various regional areas so that when it reaches Scotland, it will be ready for distribution in the big Scottish cities by the second delivery that morning. Most of the men who work on this train have been in the service of the GPO for a number of years, but naturally from time to time there is a new face among them. Take tonight, for instance, the young fellow over there at the rack in the corner. He's only been on the job for a few weeks, but he's just qualified to work on his own without the guidance of an older sorter.
Edinburgh, Aberdeen, Glasgow, Inverness, Edinburgh.
One by one, he sorts the postal packets into the pigeonholes in front of him. Monotonous work, but still demanding all his attention. But tonight, this young sorter is not really thinking about his job. He's thinking about something else.
Inverness, Aberdeen, 5 minutes to 2. 5 miles to go. And then...
Yes, 5 minutes to go, and then...
What's the two? What's the two, boys?
Together with half of the sorters in the corridor, our young friend moves into the next car, where a primitive canteen is set up and cups of tea are being poured out. He makes some excuse and moves on further down the car. Perhaps he's going to wash his hands, or perhaps... It has taken 3 months of plotting and planning to obtain that key. The key to the van which contains the registered mail. He worked quickly, 3 bags and no more he took out. But those bags had been chosen carefully. The contents were known to be negotiable banknotes, a rich prize. Now comes the cleverest part of the trick. 3 other bags, in appearance precisely the same as the original registered mail bags, had been concealed by our friend in a suitcase which he had brought aboard the train. The exchange was made and the mail van locked up once again. Everything seemed perfect. When the train came into Glasgow station, it looked as if nothing could go wrong.
Good evening.
Good evening.
You're Robert Staunton, aren't you?
Yeah, that's right.
I wonder if I could trouble you to come along to the office for a few minutes.
What do you want me for?
Oh, just a few words. Bring that case along with you.
Yes, sir.
Come on in. Now, Mr. Staunton, would you mind opening up that case for me?
How do you know?
Well, this is the one question I cannot answer. You see, if I told you, you'd not believe me.
And how did he know? It was really very simple. But as you've learned from these programs, it's the simple things that make the crook's game a mug's game. Obviously, the railway realizes that GPO sorters on the trains, if they should have crooked disposition, have a number of opportunities for putting some original ideas into practice. For that reason, every new sorter, while he's training, is screened very thoroughly by the railway police or the GPO. Our friend Staunton and his companions took all the obvious precautions. Trouble was, one of the precautions was just a little too obvious. Mr. Staunton had given his address during his training period as a lodging house in London. As a routine matter, the police checked up on his character with his landlady. His landlady, dear soul, had given him an excellent character and had mentioned, as a matter of fact, that Staunton had frequent visits from his widowed mother. The widowed mother was a bit of camouflage for Mr. Staunton to contact his companions. Unfortunately, in his original application for the job, Mr. Staunton had described himself as an orphan. Starting from that very small fact, The railway police had spun a long line of thread, which led eventually to the station master's office in Glasgow and the arrest of Staunton. Just another crook who thought that the way to easy money was along the railway lines.
I'd like to add a historic note. Of course, there has been crime on the railways ever since there were railways, which is well over 100 years. Who was the first railway criminal? Well, no one could say for certain, but I can tell you about one of the very first men to realize the possibility of crime on the railways, and what happened to him. It was long, long ago, when a trip by train was still a great event. Passengers traveled in open cars, which today we would consider little better than trucks. The guard wore a top hat, and the engine driver wore one too. The most unpleasant part of the journey was when the train came to a tunnel. There were no lights in the carriages. Worse still, there were no windows. So they soon filled up with smoke and grime. You can imagine the coughing and confusion. Well, it was this very confusion which gave our friend, a pioneer in his class, the great idea. You see, his profession was that of a pickpocket, and it occurred to him that never was there greater opportunity to practice his craft than aboard one of these newfangled railway trains when it entered a long tunnel. He went about it very carefully. He studied the trains and the passengers from all angles, and for some time pursued a most successful career. Everybody was far too concerned with their comfort to notice his activities, and when thefts were reported, it was far too late to do anything about it. Then, at last, the railway company decided that they had to take some action regarding the numerous complaints they were getting. To every poison there's an antidote, and to every crime there's an answer. Well, just as usual, our friend the pickpocket boarded a train one day, little knowing that he was followed by a detective employed by the company. Off went the train. They came to the tunnel, and our friend prepared to go about his business. He turned his attention to the man sitting next to him, a big, well-dressed but simple-looking gentleman who he picked out as a likely-looking victim. His hand was busy abstracting a solid-looking watch from his pocket, when suddenly there was a terrific roar of steam from the engine, and then a sudden flash of light. And what is it? The engine driver had no sooner entered the tunnel than, on prearranged plan, he reversed and come out again. And as for the simple-looking gentleman, there, you're right, he was the detective. Ah, dear, the way of a pioneer was always a hard one, and our friend's case proves that there's no exception to the rule.
As I told you, not all railway crime is quite so ambitious. In 50% of railway cases, the word pilferage is applicable. There have been too many examples of criminal folly by women, some of whom have sacrificed 30 to 40 years' service and pension rights for thefts of soap, a packet of chocolate, or a pair of stockings. An engine driver took coal from his engine to swap for eggs. A man-shut guard rifled suitcases in the van and regularly threw stolen goods into his own garden as the train passed his line-side home. Fur coats, typewriters, vacuum cleaners, and a piano accordion were among the goods pilfered in 1948. Out of 8,585 larceny prosecutions by the railway police last year, 2,287 were at railway theft. Thus, 3 outsiders were convicted to every 1 railway man. Statistically, this means that only 1 in every 300 rail workers is found guilty of theft.
I believe that, don't you? And just because this program has told you about some of the crimes that are on the railways, I hasten to add that a trip by a railway in Britain is one of the safest ways of travelling. But while you're about it, keep an eye on your bag. After all, if everybody were just a little more careful, most of the crooks in this world would be looking for new ways of earning their living. And it would just help to avoid that temptation to go off the rails.